The shaper is just a larger, more powerful, and more capable version of a table-mounted router. So in this case, we're using a standard quarter horsepower router, and it's mounted underneath on a table. This is a fairly common setup. It's just not as powerful and capable as the shaper. In this case, we're using kind of a toggle system with a control panel here, and this one is using a more traditional kind of machine interface. So this is what you're going to see on most types of heavy equipment: a shrouded on button, and then an E-stop for the off. In this case, you push the E-stop to turn it off, and then you twist it to reset it. So it's always safer and quicker and easier if something were to go wrong to just slap something. So the off button is almost always going to be open in a situation where you can hit it, whereas the on button in this case is in a shroud, so something can't accidentally turn the on button on. So in this case, again, you rotate it, it'll reset it, and then you can press the on button, it'll start the shaper. The shaper in this case also has a digital readout that tells us the height, and we can use that for setups. The setup for this is significantly more complicated than the router table, but it's actually easier to adjust from there. So this one is more challenging to set up, it's more procedural, but it's easier to adjust when you're setting it up. This one is a lot more difficult to adjust and change, but the procedures are more simple to set it up. So don't let that make you think this is easier to use. They're the same machine. This just has a more procedural setup, whereas this one is more of a 3 or 4 step thing. So this is going to have a 12-step setup process. For the process check on the shaper, you can use either the decorative bit or the rabbiting bit. On the router table, you're only able to use the decorative bit for the process check because, again, the setup procedures are much simpler. On the shaper, the setup procedure is a little more complicated, so I'll allow you to use the simpler routing bit. These are router bits that we are installing. A shaper is actually designed for shaper heads, which you can see this is much larger. This is sort of the industrial version of a router, so this is what you would use in industry. Shaper heads can have the same profiles as router bits. They're just built a little more robust. In that case, this is a fixture or a piece of tooling that's going to create a piece of joinery here. So these will line up and you can glue these together. Before I begin the process of installing and changing out the router bit, I'm going to move all these fences and everything out of my way. At the end of the video, I'm going to more detail about these, but basically I'm just going to move all these out of my way so they're not going to get in front of anything. So now I've opened everything up. So the first step in setting up the shaper is to press the E-stop. After you've pressed the E-stop, you're going to remove these locating rings here. So these are going to pull out. Make sure you clean off any dust that's in these too. So any dust that's on this ring right here needs to be removed. Once we've done that, we're going to open the side door. This is the side panel of the shaper. It's on the lower right side of the machine. In order to open the panel, you just press down on the red button. A little tab will pop up and you can open the panel. On the inside of the door, you can see a chart, and that will show you what speed the motor is rotating at. And then there's a handle right here that you would use to adjust the speed. We're not going to do that in this class, so typically the handle will be removed. So far up inside the machine, you'll see a silver handle. We're going to pull the silver handle and rotate it 90 degrees, and then it should drop into a detent. Once you've rotated the handle 90 degrees, you're going to then try to twist the collet until it locks in place. You can see there now it's firmly in place. I'm then going to take the large wrench that comes with each machine and I'm going to loosen the collet. It'll have quite a bit of force to remove this, Once you've loosened the nut, you'll see that the bit is actually still kind of frozen in place. If you keep spinning it, it'll come all the way up to the top, and then you can just take the wrench again, lightly lock it, lightly twist it, and the bit will come right out. Once you've removed the bit, we can go ahead and obtain the new bit that we're going to install and put it in the collet. If you need a smaller collet, we have 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch size collets. So I'm going to put the bit into the collet, and I'm going to pick it about 1/4 of an inch up off of the face of the collet. So it's not sitting flat. I'm picking it up about 1/4 of an inch and then just snugging it by hand. Once I've tightened it by hand a little bit, I'm then going to use the wrench to get it nice and tight. You want to be pulling towards your body. You don't want to try to push to tighten it, so you want to pull towards yourself, and you can just lean your body up against the machine if you need to pull harder. So give it a nice snug. Once I've put the router bit in place and tightened it down, the next and most important step is you're going to take the silver handle, you're going to pull it out, rotate it 90 degrees, and make sure it drops into the detent. At this step, you're going to need the instructor present to verify, but you're going to rotate the spindle 2 full times to ensure it's fully disengaged. If you rotated the silver handle 180 degrees or failed to lock it in place, the brake will stay engaged and then it'll actually fry the motor. So we need to ensure that it's fully disengaged. Once we have verified that the shaper bit is free spinning, we can go ahead and shut the side door and lock it in place. It actually won't turn on with the door is open anyhow. Once the door is shut, we're going to install the rings back in place. It'll be difficult to see on camera, but there's actually a little mark on the ring. That's going to show the orientation that the ring needs to go back in place. These rings have leveling feet, and you can make sure that they're perfectly flat with the table and perpendicular to the cutting bit, but in order to ensure that, you have to put it back in the same location every time. So both rings have a very faint line that's going to line up with a tick mark that's in the main ring on the machine. And again, you'll just drop both of these in place, again ensuring that that track on both rings is clear of any debris, otherwise it'll set uneven to the surface of the table. Once we've installed the bit, the next thing we're going to do is set the bit height and adjust the fence. It's actually easier to adjust the height on this machine more so than on the router, and moving the fence is a little more secure and more controlled in this case. It is, again, more procedural, but fairly straightforward. In order to move the fence, the first thing you're going to need to do is to loosen both of these knobs. So these are already loose. And then this silver knob right here is what we're going to use to advance the fence. I'm going to bring the fence forward, and then I'm going to move the actual wings of the fence so they're about 1/2 inch on either side of the bit. So they're free and clear by about 1/2 of an inch. And then there's a knob on the back. I'm going to tighten those knobs back down. And then again, I can sight down the edge and line up the bit as needed. It's easier to do from the other side where the camera is at. So now that I've lined up the fence, I can lock these two handles. It moves very smoothly, and you just rotate the knob to move it forward and back. I'm also going to bring down the safety guard as well, just above the fence there. So in order to adjust the height of the shaper, you're first going to unlock the knob in the center of the hand wheel. So loosen the knob in the center of the hand wheel, and then you're free to adjust using the hand wheel, and it'll very precisely raise and lower the cutting bit. So for the decorative edge, you'll just sight down the table and then raise and lower it until it's lined up properly, and then lock the hand wheel in place. For a rabbiting bit, a quick trick I can show you is you can actually place the ruler to where it's up against the face of the cutter, and then you can slowly lower Slowly lower the cutter until the ruler just barely slides over the front edge. So now the ruler is just above the surface. I can call that my 0 point on the DRO, and now I can raise the cutter using the hand wheel to the dimension that I need from the book. So I can raise this up. In this case, I'll go to 0.2. This is an arbitrary number. And then you can adjust it quite slowly and finally and get an accurate number. Lock it in place. Now the bit should be locked in place, and you can go ahead and make your cut. Turn it off. So you're going to rotate the emergency stop to reset it, and then press the on button. And again, you just press the emergency stop to turn it off. And I can take my calipers and measure the depth. So I'm using the step on the back to determine the depth. So now you can see I'm 0.01 from my desired dimension. I can make corrections from there.